WAPL Mornings with Laura Lee and Cutter.
Last name, is it Prato or is it Prato?
Tomato, tomato, whatever you prefer.
Oh, easy enough.
Tomato, tomato. All right. Which rhymes with Prato.
Yeah, there you go.
So there you go. You have a book called Alternative for the Masses, the 90s alt rock revolution. And author Greg Prato joining us this morning on 105.7 WAPL because today's the day the book comes out. So congratulations on that happening.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it was a lot of work, about over a year I put into this. So yeah, I'm very happy to see that today is the day.
Yeah, I saw that you interviewed over 60 people for this this book, musicians, producers, I mean, were there some surprising stories or insights that really stood out to you when you were making this book?
Yeah, there were. I mean, one thing I have to say is I was very lucky to get one of producer Steve Albini's last ever interviews. He sadly passed away just like a couple of months after I spoke with him. And it was just a matter of me picking up the phone, calling his studio. He picked up and he was up for doing the interview right then and there. So I was just in the right place at the right time. Yeah,
Greg, I met Steve Albini quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
Awesome. Funny enough, it was after a Muse concert. But a friend of mine is a manager for a band, had some tapes to drop off at his studio. I was like, I'm going right now. I'm like, it's midnight. I was like, that's okay. It's Steve. He's up. So I went with him and ended up sitting there and just talking, not radio, not anything, just talking with that guy for hours. And it was amazing. Just a plethora of knowledge that human being.
Yes, a very, very smart gentleman, and he was encyclopedic when it came to the history of music and bands and everything. Yeah, it was absolutely great to speak with him. But yeah, I mean, some of the standout stories in the book, I interviewed Ian MacKaye from the band Fugazi, and he finally set the record straight concerning the famous rumor that Fugazi turned down $1 million deal with Ahmet Ertegun and also Atlantic Records. So he finally sets that record straight, and also adds to the story that it turns out there was a second major label that was offering Fugazi a huge deal, and they also turned that down. So
why did they turn that down?
Well, they already had their own label, Discord. They were happy with how it was going. And there were some other things he talks about too, but that was pretty much it. Just that they wanted to have total say of what was going on with the band and just have full autonomy is what they wanted.
Better, you got to get the book to read the stories.
Want to get the book. Book's out today. Alternative to the Masses is what it's called. Oral history of 90s alt rock. And I said this earlier, 90s alt rock. You think of alternative today, and what did I use as an example, Laura? It was 21 Pilots, that kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But not in the 90s, it was hard rock. It was kind of everything, for everything from Garbage to Nirvana. Obviously they shared drummer / producer, but it was everything kind of in between. It was such an amazing time for such different kinds of music to come out, Greg.
That's what I love so much about it. It was the really interesting diversity of all the bands at the time. Like, for instance, Blind Melon didn't sound like Soundgarden. Soundgarden didn't sound like Jeff Buckley. Jeff Buckley didn't sound like Nine Inch Nails. It was a wide variety of bands. That's what I loved. And that's what I think is probably missing. I mean, I know that nowadays there probably are bands out there that are doing very interesting things. But as far as the mainstream goes, I really don't hear it. I just hear a bunch of bands that sound similar. They're relying on hiring professional songwriters. Like, that's another thing. All those bands I just mentioned wrote all their songs themselves, which you think of someone like, for instance, Chris Cornell writing Spoon Man, Black Hole Sun. He wrote a wide variety of stuff that I think is really second to none.
Well, and then Chris Cornell, what a great example, right? You put together look into his solo stuff, and it's completely different than Soundgarden. It's not even close to being similar.
Yeah. And you have to think, all today, I mean, there are some great bands out there, but 90s alt, that influenced fashion, politics, pop culture.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just the music. I mean, it influenced, our lives growing up.
Yeah. Something I mentioned in the book is there's been only a select few times in the history of music where a musical movement reached beyond music. Like, I think back to the 60s with the whole psychedelic thing with like San Francisco. Then in the mid 70s with the punk thing over in London and also New York. And then we could forward to Seattle grunge and also all the great alternative bands of the early 90s reached beyond music. It influenced, like you just said, fashion, politics, advertising, TV even. So yeah, it was really a great time to see. I really feel blessed too that I was of the age that I could go down to the record store the day that Soundgarden Super Unknown came out and hear it like when the first day it came
Yeah.
out, going to see them on that tour. It was just a great time to be discovering music.
The midnight releases. I used to love going to those midnight releases,
Yeah.
man.
Mm.
Um, I think, I mean, the year, right, the decade kicked off. There was the same day, Metallica, the Black Album came out. What was it? It was Metallica, the Black Album, Pearl Jam. Like there was all these different albums released within the same day, and then all these iconic ones released in what, the 2 month period,
Yeah, in
3
about
months,
2 months.
something
Yeah,
like
about 2
that.
months. In 2 months, 2 or 3 months, we had Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar Sex Magic,
Yeah.
Metallica, Black Album, Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusion, Pearl Jam 10, Soundgarden, Super Unknown, and then also in the summer was right when Alice in Chains Facelift hit. Like it had been out for a while, but it was right around that
Yeah, Man in
time.
the Box became a
Yes,
big
yeah,
hit kind of
yeah,
right before all
exactly,
that.
exactly. And then also the band U2 put out a huge album as well, which
Oh,
was,
Laura
of
loves
course,
you too.
No, no. Well, and I remember, we didn't have instant access to music back in the day. And I just remember like sitting in front of the TV, like in MTV had a countdown to the discotheque uh, music video. And I was
Mhm.
sitting there all day waiting for the discotheque music video. And
Right.
and finally when it happened, I mean, it was just, I was shooing away my mom and like, get away from the TV, and it's just, those were the days, you
Yeah,
know?
I was going to say one thing I talk about in the book. I was lucky to interview Kennedy and also Matt Pinfield, who were both, of course, MTV VJs.
Oh,
And we talk about how important the TV show 120 Minutes was at the time for discovering music. Like that was kind of like our Spotify. You would stay up late or you would tape it on your good old-fashioned VHS. Remember those days?
Oh
oh yeah.
God, I did. I had my sister. So I grew up in the country, like in the middle of
Okay.
nowhere. My sister my oldest sister had an apartment in town, so she would tape Headbangers Ball in 120 minutes for me,
Hmm.
Okay.
um, on VHS, and sometimes like Beavis and Butthead would show up on it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little portion of it, or I'd get
Right.
a little bit of like MTV Jams on one side, or something like that, and
Mhm.
it was awesome. I mean that was.
Yeah.
When I'd see my sister on Sunday and like get that VHS from last
Hmm.
week,
Mhm.
that was the best day.
Let's say
The
120
best
minute
day.
and Alternative Nation as
Yeah.
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, later
Yeah, that
on.
was yeah, I mean like the bands that I got turned on to from actually both those shows were great. And there was something it was almost like I remember the first time I saw the Smashing Pumpkins video for the song Siva. It was like it was something special about seeing it late at night. You're the only person awake in your house. It was almost like a hallucinogenic video, so it was like a
Oh
very
yeah.
trippy psychedelic thing that really you can't create nowadays just watching something on, your computer screen.
That's the one from the album Gish, right?
It is. Yep, it is. Yeah,
Real early Smashing
it is. Yeah,
Pumpkins.
yeah, it was. Yeah, honestly, with Smashing Pumpkins, I really love their first two albums. Then after that, even though Melancholy is their huge blockbuster album, I didn't really care for Billy Corgan singing that much on that album. But who am I to say? Because that's their biggest selling album. But I love the first two albums, Gish and also Siamese Dream, are two of my favorite.
Absolutely. Greg Prato joining us this morning. He is, of course, the writer of this book called Alternative for the Masses in Oral History of 90s Alt Rock, which is out today. Now, you've done a ton of books over your career, but what made you sit down and really put all this together into book form?
What it is I have to say up front, I love Nirvana. But
Okay.
it seems like nowadays people tend to take the easy way out and just say, "Yep, Nirvana, that was '90s alternative. That's it." But whereas I know at the time there were bands I loved as much as Nirvana, and I listened to still to this day that I love,
Like
and
what?
also band. And I was going to say bands that also people tend to forget, like a band called Shudder to Think I loved, a band called Lush. And it seems like bands like Dinosaur Jr. don't really get the credit that they deserve. That's also a band that I love. And then also by doing this book, there were bands that I discovered or that I wasn't that familiar with, like a band called Slint that I never heard before. That was fantastic. I also rediscovered a band called Grantley Buffalo that I hadn't heard in many, many years. Morphine was
Brantley
also great.
Buffalo. Oh,
Yes. Also, the band called Morphine was a highly original band. It was a three-piece. It was a saxophone player, a singer, a drummer, and the singer played a two-string bass with a slide. Very, very interesting band.
a two-string bass with a slide.
Yes, exactly. And it sounds very weird just by me saying it, but if you listen to their albums, the two albums I highly recommend are Cure for Pain from
Okay.
1993, I think it was, and also Yes from 1995. It's a highly original band that really should have been a lot bigger than they were.
This is the band Morphine you're talking about?
Morphine, Morphine. Yes,
Okay.
the singer's name is Mark Sandman, who is very tragic and sad. He died in 1999 while performing on stage, if you could believe
Wow.
that. Yeah,
On
heart attack.
stage.
Yeah, he died
Hmm.
from a heart attack, I believe.
Man.
So you're saying Alternative for the Masses, the 90s alt rock revolution, oral history, which is out today. This is not only the history of alt, but then we can go in there and kind of like learn backwards, like discover some new bands, well, new to us,
Right.
you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
Huh,
Yeah, you can
okay.
you can be reminded about some bands such as I was. You could also discover bands. And yeah, the book is available as a hardcover, Kindle, and also audio version, which is narrated by me. So you get to enjoy
Nice.
my sweet Long Island accent.
We like your
Lovely
You
voice.
do have a
I'm
lovely
enjoying
voice,
it.
right?
Well, thank you.
Next,
Thank you. I
I mean,
appreciate
ask one of us. We'll happily do it.
it. Okay. You're
Yeah,
on.
yeah. For your next, I mean, you've written like what 40 books or something like that
Something
so
like
far.
that. Yeah.
So the next one you have, just let us know.
Yes, absolutely.
Be Greg Prato, the oral history of rock radio and why it sucks now, but it's okay. It was okay then.
And,
I'm just kidding.
I mean, well,
Except for us, of course.
no, an actual question though, do you have another musical area, like an era that you're maybe looking into exploring next?
Well, I could tell you what my next book is going to be. I'm actually working on it already. I, like many other people, was very saddened by the news of Ace Frehley's passing. And
Mm.
once he passed away, I realized I was lucky to interview him almost 10 times over the years. And we discovered a
Yeah.
wide and we covered a wide variety of topics. So what I'm going to do for my next book is pay tribute to Ace. The book is called Talk to Me: Conversations with Ace Frehley, and I include all my interviews with Ace. And also, I'm interviewing brand new people for this, or brand new interviews for this book. Like I just interviewed Kim Thile from the band Soundgarden. I interviewed Joe
Wow.
Bonamassa, and I interviewed a bunch of other people. So that's coming out in like maybe the next few weeks as a tribute to Ace.
Oh, it's
Very
coming out
cool.
that quick.
Yes, yeah, I'm going to put it out quickly because it seems like people are upset and sad still by Ace's passing. So it would be
Who should
great to
not
pay
be?
tribute to him.
Yeah,
How could you
absolutely.
not be? I mean, it influenced everybody. I love that quote from Ace Frehley where it's if I had known I was gonna influence that many guitar players, I would have practiced more. Like,
Right.
that was Ace Frehley to a T. That
Sure.
guy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
One just to go back to this book because it's out today. Um, what do you think it was about that particular time frame in music where you could get away with, you're talking about the band Morphine and using a, two-string bass with a slide, or, even to go to the more popular mainstream level, presidents of the United States of America sort of did some of that too. In the heavier part, Soulfly, and Max Cavalera is using a baritone guitar and just the E string.
Mhm.
Like it seemed like no matter what genre you were in the 90s, there was some really experimental stuff going on. And I was wondering in your research over the years if you've been able to kind of put a pinpoint on that as to maybe why, or theories as to why.
Well, it's hard to really give a specific reason, but it just seemed like a lot of the bands from the early 90s alternative came from the underground and also indie labels. So it wasn't like they were trying to get a major label. Like, for instance, Morphine never put out an album on excuse me, they did later put out albums on major labels, but their first two or three albums weren't. So they were able to experiment, fine tune their sound. So I think that probably has a lot to do with it. But also, again, a lot of those bands are coming out of the punk world, and punk, I think, is a lot more all inclusive. That's also something else that was great about those bands is the if you think back to the mainstream late 80s, it was pretty much just like white males, if you think about all like the metal bands and stuff like that. Whereas with early 90s alternative, suddenly you have different races, sexes, it's just a whole melting pot, which was great. Almost a throwback to the late 60s, early 70s with bands like Sly and the Family Stone. Like that was kind of the vibe I got.
Right. Yeah. The melting pot of music.
Yeah.
Man, I hope that happens again someday. It was a
Yeah.
special time.
Yeah, because you get all these interesting influences and just things that on paper wouldn't work, but it turns out to be absolutely glorious sounding. So yeah, it'd be great if people became fearless again and started putting their own unique stamp on things musically.
Do you feel like there's a subgenre of the 90s alt that kind of left its like the biggest mark today? Do you think there was a subgenre that kind of broke through and, you know, like a lot of the bands today kind of take influence from?
Well, I mean, I guess grunge is still the top because if you walk into your local Target, you see Nirvana shirts still being sold. That's the one that's left the biggest mark.
Absolutely.
But there were definitely a lot of other great styles. Like for instance, shoegaze is a style that was huge in England, but never really caught on truly here, but bands like My Bloody Valentine were fantastic. Lush
Explain
was a
shoegaze
great
to
band.
me. Explain shoegaze.
Shoegaze is also referred to as dream pop.
Okay.
So the name shoegaze came from a British record label person who said all these bands, they're all just boring. All they do on stage, they're just standing there with their hair in their face, staring down at their shoes, strumming their guitars, because that was a reaction to all the arena rock that was going on at the time. So, although I agree that going to a My Bloody Valentine concert was not as exciting as going to a Van Halen concert,
True. True.
musically, I still listen to those bands and I still love them. And they influence so many bands that you wouldn't think were influenced by them. Like, I discovered that band by reading an interview many years ago with Vernon Reid from the band Living Color, who did not
Okay.
sound at all like a band like that. They were not that type of band
No.
sonically, but it just shows how many different types of musicians that My Bloody Valentine reached out to.
Interesting. The book is called Alternative for the Masses, the 90s Alt Rock Revolution in Oral History. Greg Prato, the author, kind enough to give us a few minutes this morning and talk to us about this book. I'm really looking forward to reading it in greater detail than the couple experts that I
Same.
saw before this conversation today.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, and again, I really hope that this book turns on people to new bands and helps them also rediscover bands they may not have heard of in many years.
Excellent. Greg Prato, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
doing this, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it too.
You're good. And good luck with the book and good luck the rest of the way. Greg Prato, if you missed the full conversation, some experts maybe from some of the music, you'll be able to find it at WAPL.com.